The first thing Nora Whitmore ever gave me was a book with a message inside that knew something about my marriage I had never told anyone. 3 weeks earlier, I had signed the final divorce papers ending 21 years with a man who was not cruel, dishonest, or even particularly difficult to love. That almost made leaving worse. There was no villain to blame. Just two people who had become excellent at maintaining a life neither of them questioned anymore. At 47, I packed 2 suitcases, left our Chicago condo, and drove 90 miles around Lake Michigan to settle my Aunt Evelyn's estate. Her cottage sat outside a small lakeside town where November arrived smelling like wet leaves, wood smoke, and cold water. I told everyone I needed 2 weeks to organize her belongings. The truth was simpler. I needed somewhere nobody knew what my life was supposed to look like next. On my 3rd afternoon, rain started while I was walking downtown. I ducked beneath a faded green awning and found myself staring through the window of Bellwether Books. The place looked stubbornly untouched by time. Wooden shelves leaned beneath old hardcovers. A brass lamp glowed beside an armchair. Somewhere inside, a record played softly enough that I could hear rain against the glass. "You can come in," a woman called. The books rarely judge people for dripping on the floor. I stepped inside. She stood behind the counter with a pencil tucked through her dark blonde hair, and reading glasses resting on her head. She looked about my age, maybe a few years younger. Calm gray eyes. Navy sweater. No sales smile. "I am only waiting out the rain," I said. "That is how bookstores get you." I almost smiled. Claire Bennett. Nora Whitmore. Her name registered somewhere in my memory, but I could not place it. She watched me wander past fiction, history, poetry. Looking for anything? Not really. Those are usually the dangerous customers. Why? They might find something. I turned toward her. She was smiling now barely. 20 minutes later, Nora pulled a worn blue novel from a shelf behind the counter. "Try this. You do not know what I read. You are an editor from Chicago. You alphabetized 3 books while pretending not to." I looked at the shelf beside me. She was right. That is disturbing. Occupational observation. I bought the book mostly because refusing felt strangely personal. Nora wrapped it in brown paper even after I told her she did not need to. When she handed it over, our fingers touched for half a second. Nothing happened. At least that was what I told myself in the car. That evening, rain tapped against Evelyn's kitchen windows while I opened the book beside a mug of coffee. The pages smelled faintly of dust and cedar. Halfway through the first chapter, a folded piece of cream paper slipped onto my lap. The handwriting was unmistakable. Evelyn's. My breath caught before I even read the words. "Claire, what would you choose if nobody needed your permission?" I stared at the sentence until the coffee went cold. My aunt had been gone for 4 months. I had never told her I was leaving my marriage. I had barely admitted it to myself before she died. Yet somehow her question had been waiting inside a book Nora Whitmore chose for me. And suddenly I was no longer wondering why Nora had given me that particular novel. I was wondering how long she had known I was coming. I was standing outside Bellwether Books before 10 the next morning, holding the blue novel under my coat as if it contained evidence. Nora unlocked the door at exactly 10 and looked at me without surprise. "You read quickly. You knew." Her hand paused on the open sign. "Good morning to you too." I followed her inside. "The note. My aunt wrote it." Nora removed her coat and hung it behind the counter. "Yes. How did you have it?" "It was already in the book." "And somehow you happened to hand me that exact book?" She met my eyes. "That part was not an accident." Anger came easier than confusion. "Did Evelyn tell you about my marriage?" "No." "Then why give it to me?" Nora opened her mouth, but a heavy sound came from the back of the store. "Water." We both turned. A thin stream was creeping beneath the storage room door. "Not today," Nora muttered. She hurried toward it, and against my better judgment I followed. Rain had overwhelmed an old drain near the rear entrance. Water was spreading across the floor toward stacks of cardboard boxes. "What can I do?" I asked. "You are angry with me." "I can multitask." That earned the smallest smile. For the next hour, we carried boxes into the main store. Some weighed nearly 40 pounds, so we moved those together. Nora took one end, I took the other, and we shuffled between narrow shelves while rain hammered the windows. My expensive Chicago boots were ruined within 20 minutes. I stopped caring around minute 21. You always rescue strangers' books? Nora asked. Only when I am interrogating their owner. Efficient. We set another box on a table. A strand of hair had fallen across her face. She pushed it back with her wrist because her hands were dusty. Something about the gesture caught my attention longer than it should have. I looked away. You still owe me an explanation. I know. By noon the water was contained. Nora made coffee in a tiny back office while I sat on an overturned crate, damp and exhausted. She handed me a mug. Black 1 teaspoon of sugar. I stared at it. How did you know? Evelyn. My chest tightened. She talked about me? Constantly. Nora sat across from me. Mostly with pride. Occasionally with concern. Concern about what? That you were very good at becoming useful to everyone. I looked down at the coffee. My former husband had once called that my best quality. Reliable. Practical. Easy to count on. Nora continued gently. Your aunt left instructions with me last spring. She said if you ever came here, I should give you that book. She knew I would come? She hoped. Why? Nora studied me for a moment. Because she thought there were questions you would never ask yourself, unless someone put them directly in your hands. I felt irritation rise again, but underneath it was grief. She could have called me. Maybe she tried in the ways she knew how. Silence settled between us. Then Nora stood. Come with me. She led me past the register to a narrow staircase I had not noticed. At the top was a locked wooden cabinet built into the wall. Nora opened it with a small brass key. Inside were 6 more books, each wrapped in brown paper. My name was written across every one in Evelyn's handwriting. I forgot how to breathe for a second. There are 7 altogether, Nora said quietly. The one you have was the first. I reached toward the nearest package, but Nora gently placed her hand over mine. Warm. Steady. I looked at her fingers, then at her face. She did not move away. Not yet, Claire. Why not? Her gray eyes held mine. Because Evelyn left one more instruction. You only get the next book when you are ready for the next question. For 3 days, I told myself I was not going back to Bellwether Books because of Nora. I was going because Evelyn had apparently turned grief into a scavenger hunt, and I wanted answers. The distinction became harder to defend when I realized I had changed sweaters twice before leaving the cottage. Nora was shelving biographies when I arrived. Ready? She asked. For a book, yes. For whatever psychological experiment my aunt designed from beyond the grave, probably not. Her mouth curved. That sounds ready enough. She unlocked the cabinet and handed me the second package. Inside was a collection of essays I remembered from Evelyn's nightstand when I was a teenager. A card waited between the first pages. When did being needed become more important than being known? I read it twice. She really had no interest in subtlety. Evelyn considered subtlety inefficient. I laughed before I could stop myself. Nora did too, and for one strange second grief felt less like an empty room and more like a door someone had opened. I began returning every afternoon. Sometimes there was another book. Sometimes Nora decided I was not ready, which irritated me enough to prove she was probably right. The third question asked what I had stopped doing because nobody else valued it. I remembered painting. Not walls. Canvases. I had studied studio art before switching to publishing because my father called editing practical. My husband had never forbidden me to paint. Somehow that made the abandoned easel in our old storage unit harder to explain. Nora listened without trying to interpret me. Do you miss it? She asked. I do not know. That was not my question. I looked at her. Yes. The next morning I drove 20 miles to an art supply store and bought a small watercolor set. I did not tell Nora. She noticed blue paint beneath my thumbnail anyway. You look pleased with yourself, she said. I painted a terrible lake. Congratulations. It was genuinely terrible. Then you are free to make another one. That evening, she showed me a shelf near the back where customers left books they could not bear to sell but wanted someone else to discover. Handwritten notes filled the margins. Names. Dates. Small evidence that strangers had survived things. Nora reached for a novel just as I did. Our fingers touched. Neither of us moved immediately. Her eyes lifted to mine. Gray. Steady. Close enough that I noticed a tiny crease beside her left eye when she smiled. My pulse changed for no sensible reason. I pulled my hand away. Sorry. You do not have to apologize for occupying 3 inches of shelf space. I smiled, but something inside me had gone unusually quiet. Later, Nora brought coffee to the reading table without asking how I took it. Black. 1 teaspoon of sugar. Evelyn again? I asked. Nora shook her head. You have been here 4 days, Claire. I pay attention. The word stayed with me all night. My marriage had not been loveless. But somewhere along the way, being dependable had become easier than being visible. Nora noticed paint beneath my fingernail. She noticed when I avoided a question. She noticed when I was cold and moved the space heater closer without mentioning it. On Friday, she handed me the 4th book. Something slipped from between its pages before I could read Evelyn's question. An old photograph landed face up on the counter. Evelyn stood outside Bellwether Books, perhaps 30 years younger, laughing beside another woman whose hand rested naturally at the small of her back. I looked at Nora. Her expression had changed. Who is she? I whispered. Nora did not answer immediately. That was when I understood the photograph was not another clue about my aunt. It was a secret. Nora picked up the photograph carefully, holding it by the edges as if 30 years had made it fragile. Her name was Margaret Hale, she said. She lived here for almost 15 years. I looked again at Evelyn's younger face. I had seen thousands of photographs of my aunt, but never that expression. She was not posing. She was looking at Margaret as though the rest of the world had temporarily disappeared. Were they friends? I asked, already knowing the answer was more complicated. Nora leaned against the counter. Evelyn told me they loved each other. The bookstore seemed to lose every sound except the old radiator clicking near the window. My aunt was married. Later. She never told me. She told very few people. I turned the photograph over. On the back, Evelyn had written 1 date and 2 words. Summer finally. My throat tightened. What happened? Nora took a breath. Margaret wanted them to leave together. Evelyn was afraid of losing her family. She stayed. Margaret eventually moved west. Did Evelyn regret it? She never said she regretted the life she built. Nora paused. But she regretted believing there was only one acceptable version of it. I sat in the armchair beside the counter because suddenly standing required too much effort. Memories rearranged themselves. Evelyn never married again after my uncle died. She traveled alone. Read constantly. Asked questions nobody else asked me. When I announced my engagement at 25, everyone wanted to know about the wedding. Evelyn asked whether I felt free when I was with him. At the time I thought it was a strange question. Now it felt like a warning delivered 22 years too early. Why did she tell you? I asked. Nora looked toward the rain-darkened window. Because I understood. Something in her voice made me look up. She did not explain and I did not ask. Not yet. I opened the 4th book. Evelyn's card waited inside. What truth have you avoided because admitting it might change the story you tell about yourself? I almost laughed, but nothing about it was funny. She planned these remarkably well. She knew you. Apparently better than I knew her. Nora sat across from me. People can love us deeply and still have rooms inside themselves we never enter. That sounds lonely. Sometimes it is. Her gray eyes met mine. Sometimes it is survival. The word settled somewhere uncomfortable. I thought about my marriage. 21 years of shared groceries, vacations, mortgages, birthdays, Sunday mornings. I had loved my husband. I believed that. But I also remembered how relieved I felt whenever he traveled and I had the apartment to myself. How often I called contentment happiness because questioning it seemed ungrateful. Then I thought about Nora noticing paint under my thumbnail. Nora remembering my coffee after 4 days. Nora's hand over mine beside the locked cabinet. My heartbeat shifted again. I stood too quickly. I should go. Concern crossed her face. Claire. I am fine. You do not look fine. That does not mean you have to fix it. She became very still. I was not trying to. Shame arrived immediately. I know. I am sorry. I gathered the book and photograph. But Nora gently touched the photograph. That stays here. Why? Because Evelyn left it with the books. I released it. Our fingers brushed again, and this time neither of us apologized. Outside, the rain had turned colder. At the cottage that night, I placed Evelyn's fourth question beside my unfinished watercolor. For an hour I stared at both. Then my phone lit up with a message from Nora. Storm warning tomorrow. Roads may ice after dark. If you come into town, come early. I read it 3 times. The message was practical, friendly, nothing more. Yet the thought of not seeing her the next day disappointed me in a way I was no longer able to explain as curiosity about Evelyn. And for the first time, the truth I was avoiding did not feel buried in my past. It felt like it was waiting for me behind the counter at Bellwether Books. I went to Bellwether Books the next morning because I told myself the roads would only get worse. That explanation survived until Nora opened the door and smiled. And I realized I had driven 12 miles through freezing rain because I wanted to see her. By 4, the temperature had dropped below 30 degrees. Ice glazed the sidewalks, and the county issued a warning against unnecessary travel. Nora looked through the front window at my car. You are not driving back to the cottage tonight. I have driven in Chicago winters for 20 years. And tonight you can demonstrate maturity by not proving it. I should have argued. Instead I laughed. Where exactly am I supposed to sleep? She pointed toward the ceiling. I live upstairs. Her apartment was smaller than I expected. Warm. Books everywhere. A faded blue sofa. Framed photographs. Plants crowded along the windows overlooking Main Street. Nora found me a clean sweatshirt while my damp sweater dried near the radiator. We made grilled cheese and tomato soup because the weather had emptied the grocery shelves earlier that afternoon. It felt dangerously ordinary. You never answered me yesterday, I said over dinner. About why you understood Evelyn. Nora set down her spoon. For several seconds, she watched the sleet tapping against the windows. I was with a woman named Anne for 12 years. The answer should not have surprised me. It did. Was. She died 5 years ago. Cancer. Nora, I am sorry. Thank you. There was sadness in her face, but no invitation for pity. For a long time, I thought loving someone that completely meant I had used up whatever chance I had. And now, her eyes met mine. Now I think love does not work like that. The lights flickered once, then went out. Nora found 2 candles and placed them on the coffee table. We sat on opposite ends of the sofa while wind moved around the old building. Can I ask you something? She said. Apparently everyone in this town can. She smiled. When you think about your marriage, what do you miss? I opened my mouth then stopped. I missed familiarity, shared history, knowing who bought detergent and who paid the electric bill. But the answer I expected was not there. I miss knowing what came next. Nora nodded slowly. That is not the same as missing him. The truth of it frightened me. I loved him. I believe you. Then why does everything suddenly feel questionable? Because learning something new about yourself does not erase what was true before. I looked toward the candle flame. I do not know what I am learning. Nora said nothing. That silence gave me nowhere to hide. I keep thinking about Evelyn, I whispered. About Margaret. About the choices she did not make. I swallowed. And then I keep thinking about you. Nora became completely still. My heart began beating harder. Claire. I have never thought about a woman this way before. Saying it aloud changed the air. At least, I never allowed myself to notice if I did. Nora shifted closer, slowly enough that I could have moved away. You do not need to decide what that means tonight. What if it changes everything? Then let it change only what is true. Her face was close now. Candlelight softened the small lines around her eyes. I wanted to kiss her. The realization was so clear that I almost laughed from fear. Nora must have seen something in my expression because she stopped. May I? She asked quietly. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Then I shook my head. Not yet. Nora moved back immediately. No disappointment used as pressure. No wounded silence. Not yet is a complete answer. Something inside me loosened. Later, lying awake beneath a quilt in Nora's guest room, I understood what frightened me most. It was not that I had wanted her to kiss me. It was that for the first time in years, wanting something had felt entirely like mine. By morning, the storm had moved east, leaving the town glazed in silver. Nora made coffee while I stood at her kitchen window watching sunlight catch the ice on Main Street. Neither of us mentioned the almost kiss until I was pulling on my coat. About last night, I said. Nora leaned against the counter. You do not owe me an explanation. I know. I still want to give you one. I tightened my scarf, buying myself courage. I was afraid that wanting you meant I had to immediately understand myself. Her expression softened. You do not. I am beginning to believe that. I left before I could complicate the sentence. For 2 days I stayed at Evelyn's cottage. I painted another terrible lake. Then another. I called my former husband and finished a conversation about dividing our remaining furniture without apologizing for wanting Evelyn's old writing desk. On the third afternoon, I returned to Bellwether Books. Nora was helping a customer, so I wandered toward the cabinet. When she joined me, she reached for the key. Ready for number 5? No, her eyebrows rose. I walked past the cabinet to the shelf where customers left books for strangers. I chose a worn collection of Mary Oliver essays and carried it to the counter. This one. Nora studied me. Evelyn did not choose that. Exactly. Something warm entered her smile. Then I think you should have it. I think I should buy it. Claire. Nora. She laughed and rang it up. I waited until the receipt printed. My hands were cold despite the heat. There is something else I want to choose. Her smile faded into careful attention. All right. May I kiss you? Nora did not move for a moment. Then she nodded. Yes. I stepped closer. The kiss was brief and gentle. No fireworks. No revelation descending from the ceiling. Just warmth, nervousness, and the surprising steadiness of her hand resting lightly against mine. When we separated, I laughed under my breath. What? She asked. I thought I would suddenly understand everything. That sounds exhausting. It does. How about understanding one thing at a time? I looked at her. I wanted to do that. There you go. For the next week, we moved carefully. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became walks along the lake. Sometimes we held hands. Sometimes we did not. Nothing required a definition before I was ready. Then Chicago called. My former managing director offered me the editorial director position I had wanted for nearly a decade. More authority. Better salary. My own imprint. I sat in Evelyn's kitchen staring at the offer letter until Nora arrived with takeout. That is wonderful, she said when I told her. Is it? You wanted this. I wanted it before everything changed. Nora set the food on the counter. Your career did not become less yours because you met me. I heard wisdom in the words. Fear translated them differently. You sound like you want me to take it. I want you to choose without making me responsible for the choice. Before I could answer, her phone lit up beside the takeout containers. A message preview appeared from someone named Daniel Mercer. I only caught 6 words before Nora turned the phone over. Revised purchase offer for Bellwether property. My stomach tightened. Purchase offer? Nora went still. Claire. Someone is buying the bookstore? She looked toward the dark window. Nothing is final. How long have you known? Her silence answered first. The woman who had spent weeks asking me to confront every truth I avoided had been carrying one of her own. Nora looked at the phone between us, then back at me. The store has been struggling for almost 2 years. And you were going to tell me when? When I knew what I was doing. I pushed away from the kitchen counter. You have spent weeks telling me not to hide from difficult truths. This is my difficult truth, Claire. Then let me help. How? The answer came too quickly. Evelyn left me the cottage. I could sell it. Or borrow against it. We could stabilize the store, build an events program, expand online sales. Nora's face changed. No. You have not even heard the numbers. Because the answer is still no. Why? Because you met me a few weeks ago. And you are already trying to reorganize your future around saving mine. That stung because it sounded uncomfortably familiar. Maybe I care about what happens to you. I know you do. Her voice softened. That is exactly why I need you to hear me. She went downstairs to the bookstore. I followed. Nora stopped beside the locked cabinet and took out the remaining wrapped books. There is something else Evelyn asked me not to tell you until you reach this point. She placed them on the counter. I counted automatically. There should be 3. There were only 2. Where is the 7th? Nora reached beneath the counter and removed a cream envelope. My name covered the front in Evelyn's handwriting. Inside was a single card. Claire, if you reach the 6th question, you already know why there is no 7th book. I spent too much of my life reading from scripts other people handed me. I will not leave you another one. The last book must be written by you. I read it again. Then again. My eyes burned. She planned all of this. She hoped, Nora said. There is a difference. I looked at the empty space beside the 6 books. For weeks I had imagined some final answer waiting there. Instead, Evelyn had left me nothing. Blank space. Choice. Terrified me. I turned toward Nora. Then I choose this. I choose helping you keep Bellwether. No. Why are you making this difficult? Because this is not your bookstore. It matters to me. So do I, apparently. And right now you are turning both of us into another project. I stared at her. Nora's eyes were wet, but her voice remained steady. You spent 21 years becoming indispensable. You managed schedules, feelings, expectations. You made yourself valuable by fixing things. Now your marriage is over, and instead of asking what your life should become, you are trying to rescue mine. That is not fair. Is it not? I love this place. The words came out louder than I intended. And what about me? Nora asked. Silence. The question frightened me because I knew there was an answer and still could not say it. Nora nodded slowly. That is what I thought. Do not do that. Do what? Decide what my silence means. Then tell me. I looked at the shelves, the rain-streaked windows, the counter where she had first handed me Evelyn's book. I do not know how. Then you are not ready to spend your inheritance proving it. My Chicago offer suddenly felt like another person standing between us. Maybe I should go back. Pain crossed her face, but she did not stop me. Maybe you should decide that without using me as the reason. 2 days later, I accepted the editorial director position. I packed the cottage, put Evelyn's 6 books in a box, and drove back toward Chicago beneath a colorless winter sky. Nora and I did not kiss goodbye. She simply stood beneath Bellwether's faded green awning while I walked to my car. For the first 30 miles, I told myself leaving meant I had chosen my career. Somewhere past the state line, I finally admitted the harder truth. I had not chosen anything yet. I had only run toward the life whose instructions I already knew how to follow. Chicago welcomed me back with gray sidewalks, crowded trains, and a calendar full of meetings. For the first week, I was grateful for every interruption. The new office had glass walls and a view of the river. My name appeared beneath editorial director on emails I had once imagined receiving with champagne in my hand. Instead, I sat alone after everyone left and wondered why success could feel so much like returning to a room I had already outgrown. I did not call Nora. She did not call me. I checked the Bellwether Books website twice, then forced myself to stop. On my second Monday, an assistant placed 3 manuscripts on my desk and apologized because someone had scheduled a meeting through lunch. Move it, I said. She blinked. The old Claire would have eaten over a keyboard and called it professionalism. And block an hour every day this week. For what? Lunch. Saying it felt absurdly rebellious. Small choices followed. I rented a sunny apartment instead of returning to the condo my former husband and I had shared. I bought an easel. I found a therapist who did not let me turn every question into an intellectual exercise. I painted on Sunday mornings. Badly. Happily. When my former husband called about selling the last pieces of furniture, we talked for 40 minutes. Before hanging up, he said, "You sound different." I think I am. No, he said gently. You sound more like you used to. I cried after that call, but the tears were not entirely sad. 6 weeks passed. One snowy evening, I opened the box containing Evelyn's books. Her final card was still inside the cream envelope. The last book must be written by you. I took a blank notebook from my desk and stared at the first page. For years, blank pages had been my profession. I knew how to tell other people what belonged on them. My own felt impossible. Finally, I wrote one sentence. I want a life I do not have to disappear inside. The next sentence came easier. I want to paint even when nobody sees it. Then another. I want work that matters without letting work consume me. I paused. Nora's face came to me immediately. Her gray eyes. Her terrible grilled cheese technique. The way she had stepped back the instant I said not yet. The way she had refused my money even when accepting it might have saved everything she loved. I wrote her name. Then I sat there for a long time. I had spent weeks asking whether Nora had awakened something in me. Whether grief and divorce had made me vulnerable. Whether what I felt was real enough to rearrange my understanding of myself. Suddenly those questions seemed less important than one simple fact. I missed her. Not because I needed bellwether books to become my escape from Chicago. Not because I needed Nora to explain who I was. I missed the woman herself. I wanted to hear her laugh when I alphabetized something without noticing. I wanted to know how her day had been. I wanted the ordinary things that frightened me less than it once had. The following morning, I called my attorney and told her I was keeping Evelyn's cottage. Then I negotiated 2 remote workdays each week instead of resigning from the career I had earned. Nobody collapsed. Nobody accused me of selfishness. The world simply adjusted. On Friday afternoon, I placed the notebook beside Evelyn's 6 books and drove toward Lake Michigan. Snow covered the fields beyond the highway. My hands tightened around the steering wheel when the town appeared. Bellwether's green awning was still there. So was the light in the front window. Through the glass I saw Nora behind the counter. She looked up. For one suspended second, neither of us moved. Then I picked up the blank book I had finally begun writing and walked toward the door. When I opened the door, the little brass bell sounded exactly as I remembered. Nora stood behind the counter with one hand resting on an open book. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then her eyes dropped to the notebook in my hand. "Is that number 7? She asked. "I think so." I walked toward her, feeling more nervous than I had before any board meeting in Chicago. But it is unfinished. The good ones usually are. I set the notebook on the counter. "I came back because I need to tell you something without trying to solve anything." Nora closed her book. "I am listening." I told her about the apartment, therapy, painting, the boundaries at work, keeping Evelyn's cottage, 2 remote days each week. I told her I had finally understood that choosing myself did not require destroying everything I had built. Then I took a breath. "And after I started building a life that felt like mine, I still wanted you in it." Nora's eyes softened. "Claire, I am not offering money. I am not offering a rescue plan. I do not even know what this looks like 6 months from now." My voice trembled, but I kept going. "I only know what I want now. I would like to find out whether there is room in your life for it." Nora looked down for a second, smiling through tears. "There is." I exhaled a laugh I had apparently been holding for 6 weeks. Then I glanced around the store. "What about Bellwether?" I turned down Mercer's offer. My heart jumped. "Because of me?" "Absolutely not." Her smile widened. "I negotiated a new loan, rented the upstairs office to a local accountant, and started hosting paid weekend workshops. We are not suddenly rich, but we are still here." I laughed. "You saved your own bookstore." "That was always the plan." "I am learning." Nora stepped closer. "So am I." This time when she asked if she could kiss me, I did not need another night to find my answer. "Yes." The kiss was gentle, familiar in a way that surprised me, and when we pulled apart, nothing miraculous happened. The shelves remained crooked. Snow continued falling outside. My life did not become simple. It simply became honest. A year later, I still worked in Chicago 3 days most weeks. I spent the others at Evelyn's cottage, editing manuscripts beside a window overlooking the lake and painting whenever the light was good. Nora and I learned each other slowly. We disagreed. We apologized. We made plans without turning them into promises we could not control. Bellwether books survived. Upstairs, Nora created a small reading room where people gathered on Saturday evenings. My 7th book remained unfinished on the special shelf downstairs, beside other books people had left because they had changed something in them. Sometimes customers asked why an ordinary notebook belonged there. Nora always looked at me before answering. "Because some books are meant to be lived before they are finished." At 47, I had believed finding myself would require discovering one perfect definition for who I was. I was wrong. I did not need a new label to erase the woman I had been. I needed permission to stop abandoning the woman I was becoming. Evelyn had tried to teach me that with 6 books and an empty space. Nora taught me something quieter by refusing to fill that space for me. Love was not the answer waiting at the end of my search. Love was what became possible after I learned to answer for myself. Sometimes we do not find ourselves by returning to who we used to be. Sometimes we find ourselves by finally choosing who we are allowed to become. Thank you for spending this time with our story. If it stayed with you, please subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who might need its message. And wherever you are in your own story, I hope you remember this. An unfinished page is not an empty life. It is still yours to write.